The lockdown continues to remain in force up to 31st of May. So lockdown 4.0 in force. The following activities continue to remain prohibited throughout the country. All domestic and international air travel of passengers, except for domestic medical services, air ambulance, and for security purposes mentioned by MHA. Metro rail services, schools, colleges, education institutions remain closed. Hotels, restaurants and hospitality services, except for those of housing, health and police and healthcare workers stranded, including tourists and quarantine facilities, will remain open. The number of restrictions that are mentioned are very, very specific. In fact, Nikunj also joining the broadcast at this point of time. Nikunj, take us through what exactly has been eased with this order.
Madhav, the big piece of breaking news coming on Times Now first, as always, is the fact that the government of India has relinquished the charge of deciding the zoning activity in the country. The zoning activity decisions will now be taken by the state governments. The red, green, orange and containment zones will be decided by the concerned district magistrates in consultation with the state governments. So, for the first time after nearly close to 50 days and close to 2 months, we are now seeing state governments being reverted back to their original powers of deciding on the restrictions in a lockdown process. Remember, the original lockdown restriction powers are vested in the state governments, but under an executive order invoking National Disaster Management Act, the government of India had taken over those powers and the national lockdown became the reality in this country. But the number one big piece of news now, state governments, as they have been asking for, have got the liberty to decide the zoning areas, the zoning categorization in their respective states and union territories. So government of India, after close to 2 months of national lockdown, releasing or relinquishing the powers to enforce lockdown conditionalities and zoning prowess, to reverting them back to the state governments and union territories. Number two, the district magistrate has been empowered by the government of India, though the original powers also are vested in the district magistrate by the orders of various states and union territories, to decide which area will fall under what zone, and the zoning categorization will also be done by the state government. But the matrix for the zoning activities will, in a transparent manner, will be put out by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So 3 big takeaways. Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to issue a national matrix for the zoning activities. District magistrates, state governments, union territories become empowered to enforce lockdown conditions and zoning activities also. So no more red, green, orange zones and containment zones from the side of government of India in the lockdown process. Then another big piece of news that impacts directly our viewers, no flying. No domestic, no international flying for at least 15 more days. Quite clearly, opinion on that was divided. Some state governments wanted flying open, but the government of India, once again, remember, these are exclusive domain areas with the government of India. So government of India once again deciding to err on the side of caution. So no domestic flying other than those flying for air ambulances, security purposes and other related activities already permitted in the National Executive Committee guidelines. More critically, no metros, no malls, no theatres, no schools, no colleges, educational institution, religious congregation and other social functions to be allowed for 15 more days, other than what have been earlier permitted with certain kind of restrictions, with a gathering of 20 people in certain cases and up to 50 people in certain other cases. So those are the big takeaways. What has been allowed, also a big takeaway there, inter and intra-state movement of people, goods and services with the concurrence of both the union territories and states wherever people are going or coming from. So till now, if you wanted to cross state borders, there were specific restrictions and only a certain category of people could have crossed the state borders, but not anymore. That has been allowed by the government of India. Again, interstate movement at least is in the exclusive jurisdiction of government of India, and people who are traveling on the means that have been specified other than the mass means of transportation like flying and railways have been allowed with specific permission conditionalities. More critically, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare will also be having separate meetings and issuing zoning criteria and categories that various state and union territories have so far been following. In the containment zones, people living in containment zones, remember in Delhi itself there are at least 70 containment zones. no activity, no further relaxation of the activities other than the activities which are essential, bare minimum, and have been allowed so far by the various governments in their respective jurisdictions. So major takeaway at this point in time of the Ministry of Home Affairs is guideline, which, remember, Madhav, are relaxed, but the larger chunk of the responsibility of the guidelines now goes to the state governments and union territories. They are the ones who will issue respective guidelines, which will make this lockdown take its proper shape and size, because these guidelines are now only indicative guidelines other than the exclusive domain area subjects of the Ministry of Home Affairs, or consequently the Government of India, like national domestic flying, international flying, railroads, passenger services, etc.